right, hello and welcome to the newly titled Terps Talk. I'm your host, Branden Roth. Decided we talk about Terps every single week, so I might as well just do a whole show about Terps recruiting, Terps basketball, Terps football, whatever Terps I can fit in. So I think the new format will definitely fit me a little bit better since I always end up talking about Terps anyways. So let's talk first about Terps basketball. Terps had a really good game against Niagara last night. They started off a little shaky, but they finished out strong and ended up winning by 14. Had a great second half, led by Nick Faust. First double-double of the year. You saw him really come in and against an undersized team, be able to rebound, be able to score, be able to do a little bit of everything. So hopefully he continues this hot streak through the tournament and continues it into next year. He's one of the guys that everyone was a little bit disappointed about that he didn't really have a bigger year this year. Everyone thought he was going to be a breakout player and didn't quite live up to that, but it seems like he's starting to come around now. Um, that game definitely had some worries in the beginning. You saw Maryland get out hustled, get just smaller lineups this entire year. They've struggled, especially Alex Len. It seems like has struggled against small lineups. He's been unable to get out and guard shots. He's been unable to get back on screens, but you really saw Maryland's depth take over in the second half. Niagara looked tired. I mean, they were only 6 or 7 guys deep, and Maryland's 10 deep. So you saw them really get tired in the second half, and I think that's honestly going to be another issue in their upcoming game against Denver. Similar teams. I honestly think Niagara might be a little bit better than Denver, but we'll see. Not many people even knew Denver had a basketball program that was legitimate until recently. So I think it was a good game for the Terps. Good game to realize that they were serious about the NIT, unlike Florida State and Kentucky. Obviously, they went in there and weren't really taking the NIT seriously. So at least we know Maryland's taking the NIT seriously. They're trying to win games. They're not just pissed off because they didn't make the NCAA tournament. And I think this can definitely be a learning experience for them. Obviously, they have another game at Comcast on Thursday against Denver. Denver is a similar team to Niagara, probably even a little bit smaller, but they play a lot of the same offensive and defensive style that Virginia does. They slow the ball down. They don't score a lot of points, but they don't give up a lot of points either. The biggest guy on their team is 6'6". So you look at teams that we've played like this year, and you would think in those games Alex Len would have dominated, being that he's 6, 7, 8 inches taller than their biggest guy. But it seems like those are always the games where Alex Len seems to somehow disappear. How that happens, I don't know. Why he can't score over someone that's 6'6", but he can score over a 7-footer. Doesn't make sense, but that seems to be what ends up happening for some reason. I mean, I think you have to worry about the same things in this game. You have to worry about them speeding up the pace and Maryland's bigs like Chuck and Shaq and Len not being able to keep up with that pace. Um, but I think more importantly, I think Maryland's got the depth that they'll need. So if they do pick up the pace, that maybe Denver will do the same thing like Niagara did in the last game, where they'll keep it close in the first half, but by the second half, they're going to be a little worn down. They're going to run out of steam, not have the same shooting touch that they had in the first half. And I mean, I think it's another game where Maryland pulls away late and wins by a pretty decent margin. I mean, that's what you would like to see from the Terps. Um, Obviously, I think Dez needs to. I honestly think Dez Wells just needs to calm down in these couple of games. We don't need him to come out and score huge in either of these games. So if I were Turgeon, I would honestly give Dez a rest. He looked like he was tired in the game against Niagara. He had such a great ACC tournament, and he was utilized so much that the guy was probably just running out of steam. So. Hopefully we can get him on the right, especially if we advance past Denver and we get to a game against Alabama, which is a tough team and a team that could beat Maryland definitely. So hopefully Maryland can get past that, and we'll see what happens going on. I mean, in the quarterfinals, after that, every game is going to be a tough game. You're talking about people like Alabama. You're talking about people like Virginia. You're talking about like good teams, Iowa. Lot of good teams out there that could beat Maryland, and Maryland needs some experience against some top-notch teams, which outside of ACC play they didn't get this year. So, going forward, we'll see how that goes. Also looking forward, Look at the Big Ten divisions come out. Well, not officially come out, but there's been speculation and leaked sources as to what the Big 12, I guess it is now, if it doesn't expand even more in the next year, divisions are going to look like. And Maryland, I'm not so sure I'm happy about the way the divisions look for Maryland. I mean, you look at, there's an East and a West, or whatever they want to title it, whether it's Legends and whatever. I don't know. They like to come up with some stupid names, but anyways, if it's going to be East and West with what it looks like mostly, and the East is going to be Maryland, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, and either Purdue or Indiana. So you look at that from either major sport, football or basketball, and it doesn't it doesn't look good for Maryland. I mean, football wise, you see powerhouses that of every year: Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State. I mean, I honestly don't know if Maryland can finish above any of those teams. Maybe Penn State, just because of all the sanctions and everything they face, but even that's a stretch. I mean, I guess there's a possibility Maryland could finish higher than Michigan, Michigan State on a great year, but the way they've been recruiting and playing lately, that's awfully far fetched, and we all know Ohio State is going to dominate that division probably most years. So basketball, you look at almost as bad. I mean, you talk about Michigan, who's been on the rise and really good, and especially with a bunch of underclassmen. Michigan State, who's always good year in, year out. Ohio State, who has been good year in, year out lately. And then you look at Purdue or Indiana. I mean, if Indiana ends up in that conference, that's going to be just as tough in basketball, too. So you look at the conference alignment and the way it's going to be, and I don't think it's favorable for Maryland. They go into a conference for money, but is the product on the field going to get any better when Maryland's getting the crap kicked out of them every week? I don't think it is. It's going to be hard to recruit kids when you're playing against powerhouses every week who they know they have no chance of beating. So we'll see if that's the actual alignment and the way it ends up, but there's no saying that that's how it will or won't, but everyone seems to be talking about it right now, so I figured I would touch on it for a little bit. Something else that people are talking about in the Maryland community is that a Deadspin article that came out this week about the amount of All-American recruits that come out of various states, and Maryland per capita has the most All-American recruits that come out of Maryland, and the only bad thing is we only retain 17% of them, which is the lowest out of any of the top 10 states that produce basketball recruits. So you talk about Mark Turgeon has said about putting fences up around the DMV multiple times. He's alluded to keeping kids in state, and I mean you can see why when Maryland has maybe the best per capita basketball state in the country. They don't need to go out of state. If they get the good in-state kids every year, Maryland's going to be a top 10, top 25 program year in and year out. But that's it. That's the problem, is that Maryland hasn't been able to keep those kids in the last 10 years. I mean, out of all the top recruits you see coming out of the state of Maryland and D.C. and even Northern Virginia, how many have Maryland gotten? I mean, not very many. There's not a bunch that come to mind. I mean, obviously Roddy Peters comes to mind, but a lot of the guys Maryland has had recently have been out-of-state guys. So you look at that, and hopefully Turgeon, it seems like he's starting to turn that around. He's starting to keep in-state kids in-state. But if Maryland really wants to be a serious contender on the national level, it's something they're going to have to do year in and year out. So we'll see. The numbers were obviously alarming. I didn't think our retainment rate was that low as the top recruits, but that's low. I mean, that's almost 1 in every 10 that we're getting, which obviously all American players don't come around but once every couple years. So that's probably one guy we've gotten in the last 10 to 15 years. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head out of any top recruits that we've gotten out of the state of Maryland. No one comes to mind. I mean, all the guys we have been under-recruited guys who came to college, got better, and ended up being good players. But there's no guys that stand out in your mind that were great super recruits. I mean, Mike Jones in the 90s was a good recruit. He was a 4-star guy, but he wasn't an All-American caliber player. Roddy Peters may have been this past year if he had been healthy all year, but obviously he wasn't, so that kind of kept him from doing that. He's probably the best recruit we've gotten in some time. So you look at that, and it's definitely worrisome. You hope Mark Turgeon can turn that around, but we'll obviously have to wait on that a little bit. Something else I wanted to touch on the basketball front is Maryland is part of a new deal at the Barclays Center to start a yearly tradition to play a game there. I know Kentucky is signed on. There's been a couple other teams speculated on that will sign on too. I mean, obviously Barclays is a big event now. It draws a lot of big time schools. I think it's great for Maryland to get in on that early before it gets too blown out and the Dukes and the Kentuckys of the world. I mean, obviously Kentucky's in it already, but other schools that are big name schools get in on it and try and muscle Maryland out. So we'll see. Hopefully that works well. Hopefully that boosts our out of conference schedule, which killed us so bad coming tournament time this year. But you look at that, and a lot of people have rumored that maybe we're going to play Michigan in that game. So that would definitely be interesting, especially this year with Evan Smotrich coming into the fold and coming from Michigan. So that would be a reunion game of sorts for him. So definitely would be interesting to see us play against a top team like that, especially at the beginning of the year. Everyone thought maybe Kentucky was that team this year, proved not to be so. But that would definitely get the basketball team off on a good out of conference schedule swing. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully they can bring in some other top programs to play alongside Maryland and Kentucky. Um, One other thing I want to talk about real quick is I just want to touch on women's basketball. They had the selection show on Monday. They got a 4 seed. Fortunately, they're in the same little region as the UConn, so that's not a great draw. Obviously, Maryland's going to be favored to win their first 2 games, but they're going to be completely underdog in the UConn game. I don't think they've beaten UConn since the national title year, if they even beat them that year. So I never claimed to be a huge women's basketball knowledge guy, but definitely disappointing to see the women who had so much promise this year with all the injuries and everything. They get a crappy draw in the same bracket as UConn. So good luck to the women's team, but it's not looking great for them. So let's move on to a few quick recruiting notes we got for this week. The big thing upcoming is a Dwayne Morgan announcement. He originally was slotted to announce his decision on April 7th. I guess after visits and some recent speculation that he's moved his commitment ceremony up to March 27th. So that's a week away. So this time next week we'll know where possibly our highest rated recruit possibility will be going. His choices right now are Maryland, UNLV, and Georgetown is where he's narrowed his top 3 down to. Obviously, I think Georgetown has kind of been a late comer of sorts in the top 3, so I think they're probably on the outside looking in. It's really everyone's saying it's down to Maryland and UNLV, and a lot of people are speculating that UNLV is the favorite, and that's where he's going. That would obviously be a huge disappointment for Maryland. I mean, Dwayne Morgan's a St. Francis kid from Baltimore. Bino Ranson is a St. Francis guy. You would hope that he would be able to pull those guys out of that school, especially of a Dwayne Morgan's caliber. We've been on this guy from the beginning. So, I mean, he's the type of guy that changes that DMV wall that you talk about with the Deadspin article and everything. He's the type of guys that we've typically let escape us in the past. And, I mean, it's hard to say that if he goes to UNLV, you're not looking at a lot of the same situations that we've gone through in years past with Gary Williams, where the top recruits go elsewhere and you're left with the table scraps. I mean, not to bust on any of the guys who we've gotten, because most of them have ended up becoming good, but they're not the guys who are coming in and being good from the jump. They're the guys who come in and have to mature a couple years and end up being good, kind of like a Seth Allen, who has shown flashes of being good, and you can tell with time he's going to be really good. But it's the guy that takes until his junior year before you really see all that progress come to shape and really do well in the ACC. So Dwayne Morgan's not necessarily a world-beating talent, but he is a 5-star recruit, which Maryland doesn't have chances at very often. And again, he's one of these guys who can come in and, I mean, if he's not playing right away, he's at least going to challenge for playing time right away, and he can further that DMV fence that Maryland wants to pull up around D.C., Maryland, Northern Virginia, where we can get the best recruits out of here, and it's going to be damn hard for other teams to come in and get those recruits. So, hopefully he makes a good decision. We talked about Dwayne on the show a couple times. Obviously, he's probably going to play 3 at the next level. Um, it's hard to exactly tell his talent at St. Francis a lot of times, just because it just depends. Sometimes I've seen him play a couple times, and sometimes he goes out there and he's their best player and their leading scorer, and other times he kind of defers to other people, and I mean that's good. I mean it's good that you have a kid who's unselfish and doesn't have to be the star of the team every single game. I think obviously that would play well in what Maryland does, and a lot of people have compared him kind of to like a Victor Oladipo. I mean, obviously, I mean, I don't know if anyone would say his ceiling is as high as Victor's has gotten to, but he's the type of kid who's going to come in and maybe right now doesn't look like the world-beating prospect, but he's going to come in, he's going to work hard, he's hard-nosed. He's going to give you lots of effort, and he's going to get consistently better from year to year. And he's a guy by his junior year who you could see being a top pick type of guy. He's got the body, he's got the tools to make himself that. It's just a matter of how willing he is to work hard. So, um, I guess we'll see on the 27th what happens there. Obviously, we're all rooting for Maryland to get him. You're hoping Bino can get in house and talk to the parents, talk to Dwayne, hopefully work some of his magic, and Maryland can pull out a commitment there at the last second. So I'm again gonna have a little bit of abbreviated show this week. Obviously, we're not in the throng of recruitment season right now. We're still waiting for some of the football camps to pick up. But speaking of football, I'm going to touch on a couple guys real quick. One guy that I never talked about was Jared Cohen. He was a recent offensive lineman commit from McDonough in Baltimore. He's Maryland's first commitment in the 2014 class, and I mean, it was a really good one for Maryland. He's an offensive lineman, which Maryland is always in need of offensive linemen. It seems like every school in the country is always in need of offensive linemen. He's a big kid. He's a really skilled kid. I mean, I've seen him play once last year, and he was probably their best lineman last year, and as a sophomore. So, um, he's a good physical specimen, which with offensive linemen is probably the most important thing. It seems like nowadays in recruiting, most coaches feel like they can coach up linemen, and it's really just that toughness and physicality and size that people are looking for with these guys. And Cohen's got all of those things. He's a smart kid, and he plays like he's a smart kid. I mean, a lot of kids get great GPAs, but they don't necessarily play smart on the field, don't have a great football IQ, and he does. He's a guy who's defended some pretty good pass rushers. I mean, you talk about going up against Gilman and Calvert Hall, and those guys every couple of weeks, and those are some. I mean, Gilman's had some of the best pass rushers in the nation the past few years. I mean, you talk about Henry Pogge, you talk about Melvin Keene, and you talk about couple. I know there's lots of Gilman guys, Micah Kaiser, other guys I'm forgetting, but there's lots of high D1 recruits that have come out of Gilman. There's other high D1 recruits that have come out of Calvert Hall, and those are guys that he's had to block every year. So you know he's going to have experience against some of the highest level of competition, and he's thrived in that. I mean, McDonough has never been a super powerhouse, but we have gotten other people from there. Roman Braglio. Last year's recruiting class, we got him out of McDonough, and I know that Jared and Roman have talked, according to previous interviews written and articles written by other people. So hopefully that helps keeping that pipeline alive. I mean, anytime you have a pipeline to any school in the MIAA or the WCAC, you want to keep that going, and it seems to be something that Maryland has developed there. McDonough's a school on the rise. I mean, the last couple of years, they've been the third school right behind Calvert Hall and Gilman, and they've competed with those two teams. So hopefully they can continue to improve. Maryland can get in there and continue to grab some good recruits out of the Baltimore area. Last guy I want to touch on real quick this week is Marcus Allen out of Wise, another guy who I've talked about once before. But in the recent weeks, he has blown up. I mean, when we talked last about Marcus Allen, he had a few offers. I mean, he had Pitt, he had Maryland, might have had Penn State and Rutgers. He's got 20, 25 offers now. Some big boys like Stanford and Nebraska, and Arizona and some other schools have jumped in from the West Coast. So I mean, when West Coast teams start jumping in like that, you know this kid's become a national product. I've seen the kid play. He's got the perfect physicality for a free safety. He's got great build. He's 6'5". I mean, he's still a little skinny, but obviously he's got plenty of time to fill out. Don't know that he's done growing. He's definitely a ball hawking safety. He's got the height. He plays like a wide receiver. He goes out there and he's a ball hawk. I mean, he's definitely a kid who I think could come in and contribute to Maryland right away. He's the type of guy who you want out there playing center field, and you tell him to any ball that comes out his way to bring it in. So I think he's definitely a type of kid who Maryland has a good chance on. We were one of the first teams in on him. He has had mutual interest. He said that he likes Maryland. He said that he appreciates the fact that we were one of the first teams to give him an offer. And I think that is a super important pipeline that we need to open up is to Wise High School. Wise has produced some of the top kids in the state the past few years. I mean, their football program has gone to state championships. They won the state championship this past year. They've been to state championships in the past. They've been in the playoffs almost every year since they've existed. And this year alone, they had 7, 8, 9 D1 kids. I mean, granted, a lot of them didn't go to super like huge D1 schools. I mean, a lot of them were to Old Dominion and Towson and stuff like that. But still, they're talking about D1 football players. And anytime you have a school producing kids like that, you've got to open up those lines of communication. They've been a super successful school the past few years, so definitely, hopefully, we can get that kid. They've got a couple other kids in the sophomore class who are also on the rise, who Maryland could be looking at. So we'll see on that front. But Marcus Allen is definitely going to be an important domino to getting a lot more PG County talent for football and out of Wise High School in particular. So I hope everyone enjoyed the first episode of Terps Talk. The revamped show title, in essence, is really the only difference. But I appreciate everyone tuning in. We're going to continue to keep up on all your Terps information, whether it be basketball, whether it be non-revenue sports like lacrosse, which is what we're going to have to start talking about soon with basketball season winding down and recruiting season not really picking back up yet. But I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Tune in again next week at the same time, same place, and I will see you guys next